I appreciate folks joining, and we've got 32 people, so we'll get it going. Again, appreciate everybody singing "Happy Birthday" to Carol. We're going to be talking about Expo 58 in Brussels today, and I'll be honest with you up front, it's not one of the World's Fairs that I could say I know everything about or anything, or I guess I know something about it, but it's not one of the ones I would say I could write a book on it today, maybe in a week I could. But what I've done is in past weeks, I've tried to go through a fair and say, here's all the shots of the US pavilion, here's all the shots of the USSR pavilion, here's all the shots of Japan. In this particular week, this is going to be more like a bunch of slides that were, the carousel fell down, the slides are out of order, and we're going to be hopping around all over the place because I'm going to be going through the slides in the order they were shot as opposed to sorted out by theme, because frankly, I have some pictures of things I don't yet know what they are. If people do recognize them, please throw them in the chat or let me know when we're doing the discussion part at the end. But Expo 58 was a major milestone in the world of World's Fairs. It was the first post-World War II World's Fair, and it was really a big thing to get fairs back on the map. They had obviously stopped after 1939 when the war broke out, and then everybody was doing reconstruction across Europe, trying to recover from the damage of the war. And Belgium decided that they would do Expo 58. Every 25 years, the country had been celebrating its anniversary, and it would have come up about 1955 or so, but they decided to put off their annual or 25-year celebration and do a big expo, which they thought they could be ready for 1958. And they did. It was on the site of a former expo that was held in 1935. And again, they were trying to do 55, but trying to get these things done on time, schedule, budget, they ended up in 58. So they were able to reuse a few buildings that had been left from Expo 35. And I'll go through, let me start with a site map of the event. Let me get it here. I have to go back to screen share. Share screen, and there it is. Okay, so this is basically a map of Expo 58. On the left-hand side, you see some, can somebody wave? Can you see my cursor? Does it show? Okay, over here was buildings left from the Expo 35, and we'll take a closer look at them. This is the Grand Palace, the major theme building for the fair. Over in the center here, the Atomium, the theme structure for the fair. And there were various zones. Matter of fact, like up here, this was the Belgian zone. Being the host country, they had obviously gone way out of their way to show that Belgium was back from the horrors of war. Not just Europe, but Belgium in particular was really well done. There was a foreign zone which had 51 countries participating. Some major ones up here, we have the United States Pavilion, over here the USSR Pavilion. You had France, you have a number of really excellent buildings from the various countries. You also had a Belgian Congo area. It was a big issue for Belgium. There were still a lot of colonies at the time. And this was their major one that they were celebrating. There was an international area, which was different from the foreign area because the international area was international organizations such as the International Red Cross, the United Nations, that sort of thing. We have another one, Merry Belgium, which would look very similar to folks that were fans of the 64 World's Fair Belgian Village, and we'll see some of that. And there finally was an amusement area with the traditional merry-go-round and Ferris wheel and that sort of thing. We also had a skyway. They called it the Telelift. It ran across the fairgrounds, and you could take two different rides on that. So this is basically a look at the major area, and we'll be hitting most of the major pavilions. There were a large number of entrances into Expo 58 since it was such a large site. I think there were about 10 different entrance gates that went in. The site also had this large park area up over to the right, which was very nice. And you can also see a large green area in the center here. It's one of the things that I think made Expo 58 kind of different from a lot of others because you felt in a very wooded area. There were some areas of Expo 67 that reminded me of this with the being out in nature and that. But you'll see shots of people having picnic lunches under the trees and tables set up for them to eat at. And so a lot of green area, which was nice because so many expos and fairs tend to pave everything over because so many of them, we've talked about before, are built in former railroad yards or industrial waste dumps or things like that. Or they're in areas that are newly reclaimed, like the 39 World's Fair had been a trash dump. 39 San Francisco World's Fair was newly reclaimed from the San Francisco Bay. So you didn't have these long-term growths of greenery, which I think really helped make Expo 58 stand out. So again, what I'm going to be doing is going through these in no particular order, basically just the way that they were shot or ended up on the photographer's roll. And we're going to start with one of the two major Cold War faux pavilions, the United States Pavilion, designed by famous architect, oh God, I'm losing his first name, Durrell Stone. I mentioned past when we talked about Disney and World's Fairs, how they spent all the money on the building and then didn't come up with much for the inside. If you look just off to the left, we see another small circular building. That's where the Disney Circarama movie, America the Beautiful, was shown. So this was a great view of the U.S. Pavilion, how there's fountains in front, different flags of the states ringing the building. Another nice view of it at night. It was a spectacular building, and this was really a big thing for the USA and the USSR to try to convince each of the other countries of the world that their way was the right way. Look how big, look how magnificent we are. And just across the way was the USSR Pavilion. Again, of the two of them, it's hard to say which one impresses me more. The USSR Pavilion is frankly a monumental structure with a tremendous amount of interior space. We'll be seeing more of that. Some pavilions you look at and you figure, how does this represent the particular country? Does anybody have a guess which one this is? If you say Great Britain, you would have won. There were actually two pavilions there for Great Britain. One, this representing things from a national history point of view, and another one we'll see later for representing British industry, which was a tradition that had been done in a lot of other World's Fairs, whether it be a government pavilion and a industry pavilion from that country. So this is one of the examples I mentioned, what I think made Expo 58 very charming in a way. You had the walkways, beautiful flowers, the theme structure, the Atomium up behind it, and just a nice view walking through the area. The Atomium, again, the theme structure represents a iron cell. I think it's 2.5 times billion magnified. So each of the round spheres represents an atom, and they're all linked together into a single molecule of iron. You can see in the bottom left there that there's windows in the spheres. You can actually go up in them. The topmost one has a restaurant you can still go to today and get a nice view of Belgium. Just looking out in the countrywide, this is about 4 miles out from the major city here, Brussels, so you can get a nice view towards the city from it. But they also had various displays that you could walk through those tubes into the different spheres and then find your way back down to the ground. And it looks pretty neat at night. They had the little lights all going. They're supposed to be the electrons circling the atoms, and nice view of it. So I have to hop down here to the next roll of slides. Okay, so all of Brussels got into the act. You can see a road sign here in beautiful downtown Brussels pointing out the way to Expo 58. The city went all out, bringing the world into Brussels. It was a major coming out again after the war. You'll see very little signs that the war had ever occurred in any of the areas. They did some things like extend the tram lines out to Expo. They also modernized their rail system. There was not a direct connection to the Expo site by rail, but they knew so many people would be coming into the country for Expo. They put a lot of time and effort expanding their rail stations and the airport modernizing it for it. And this again is the Grand Palace. The building behind it was left from Expo 35. And let's take a look at that for a comparison. Three major buildings were left. This was one of them. You can see how different it looks, a very brutish style of architecture. So what they did was they didn't have the money to tear this down, put up anything else, because the building itself is still functional. It just didn't look modern and showing that Europe was now alive and vital. So we'll flip back one slide again. They built this infrastructure of this facade across the front of it. Put the Expo 58 symbol on it, and these stars all lit up at night. It's very, very nice looking. And again, lots of views of different things as we wander around. You had these telelifts, the sky ride going down towards the Atomium. Off to the right, you had a pavilion about electrical energy. There were all sorts of things, again, particularly in the Belgium area, trying to point out why Belgium was a great spot to do business with. To be a partner with, and if nothing else, just ship your material to the rest of the world through Belgium. So lots on their airport, rails, ports, that sort of facilities. Another view of all sorts of different odds and ends. We have the chapel, the bells over at the right. We'll be seeing more of the Vatican. You have the France Pavilion in the back. Again, folks enjoying their sky ride. Nice shaped trees going down one of the avenues. The large building on the center there, off to the left with the giant arrow on it, was an interesting one. This is the Civil Engineering Pavilion. And that big structure off to the left did absolutely nothing other than to prove what you could do if you wanted to do cantilevered construction, how much you could support things from one area and extend out to another. So it was a great piece of engineering. We'll be seeing the map that's underneath it in a few moments. But it was certainly an eye catcher that you could build something like this, because there was nothing at the other end of that holding it up in the air other than the base of it was doing it. So somebody enjoying their time out in the gardens. We're inside the United States Pavilion now. As I mentioned earlier, they spent a massive amount of money on this pavilion. The displays were a little lackluster. The USSR generally won for the display quality. The major facility or feature of this pavilion was this long walkway down to the square in the fountain that they would hold fashion shows several times a day, trying to go off and show the world how hip America was, the great fashions we had. Around the rest of it, you can see different murals, and we'll see some of them closer up about the American way of life. They also had American Indian dancers come and perform. Different things. The University of California marching band raised the money on their own to come over and participate, since the US government didn't have the money to bring them over. I get a kick out of this beautiful pavilion, all the money spent on it. If you look just about dead center, or just a little below dead center, what do you see? A rowboat sitting at the middle of the fountain. So they had to have a way to go and clean this giant fountain, and the guy would come out and skim things that were sitting on it. You think they might have found a little bit of a way to hide the rowboat, but instead, no, it's sitting out there in plain sight. Again, another view inside the USA Pavilion. Lots of people looking at the various displays down below. Outside the fountains again. You can see up above there's a large elevated walkway. People could get from one end of the expo site down to the other. There were periodic staircases letting you go down to the ground level, or you could walk down below on either side of fountains that were underneath it. And across the plaza, looking from US over to the USSR. So the two of them constantly staring at each other throughout the time of Expo. Well, this one I straightened out, so photographer was a little tilty. And again, now we're inside the USSR Pavilion. As I mentioned earlier, a tremendous amount of exhibit space. All sorts of the things in here. There were some displays about Russian culture, and I had some shots of those, but most of this was about Russian manufacturing might. Because again, the whole purpose of Expo 58 was to let everybody know that Europe was open for business again. So we have a giant statue of Lenin, quite spectacular in size. Off to the right, you see some aircraft in flight as they're trying to show what Aeroflot and the other Russian airlines could do for you. There were all sorts of displays on drilling rigs and power plants and just basically everything they covered in Russian business was in here. This is from the other end looking back down. Again, very kind of heavy-handed. The Russians, I never would say in any of the pavilions I've ever seen, have been very subtle in their message. So you have these two figures on either side of it, talking about how the socialist government and the guys with this big hammer or whatever he's got over there, and I think she's got wheat off to the right-hand side, which is sort of ironic because just a few years later, they were desperately buying wheat from the United States. Back to the USA, one of the fashion shows, the model strutting down the ways there. We hop outside, we're into one of the international pavilions, or as they call them, the foreign pavilions. This is Thailand. Just like in the Expo 67, or before that, the 64 World's Fair, a very nice, beautiful building with lots of gold leaf to give it some great attraction to it. Germany had a very well-received pavilion from an architectural point of view. You had these two very clean-cut glass buildings on either side linked with these sky bridges, and a very nice patio area down below. So architects, as they went through the fair, rating the various pavilions, the Germany pavilion ultimately came in very high because it was very sleek, very high-tech. It would be a heck of a job to keep those windows clean, but it was a very well-received pavilion. Mentioned before a map underneath the civil engineering pavilion. This is a map of Belgium to a 3500 scale. You can see a bunch of satellite dishes off in the back. This was an interactive map with some moving features on it, and all those flowers and everything were attended to. I've got quite a few pictures of the gardeners out walking through the gardens during the fair, pulling weeds, trimming the flowers, keeping it attractive and nice. But it was a very nice three-dimensional map diorama, if you would, of Belgium. And there again, this shows the pavilion, the giant spire, and then you can see the map of it down below. And this one is inside the Czechoslovakia pavilion. Czechoslovakia had some very interesting pavilions at a number of fairs. Very popular one at Expo 67, one of my favorites there. And they had really, for a very small country in terms of competing against the US or USSR, Great Britain or whatever, they really held their own, bringing over a tremendous amount of cultural artifacts, but also showing off some of their industries, particularly glassware, things that they were excelling in. This one is looking outside of Czechoslovakia, a nice little fountain area. Exterior view of it. And again, for the size of the country, they've done some very nice jobs in the size of their pavilions. Thailand on a rainy day. Kind of small pavilion, and I guess definitely not wheelchair friendly from the looks of it, but well received as one of the more interesting foreign pavilions. And again, enjoying themselves on a rainy day. And then we go over to Morocco. Morocco was another interesting one with a restaurant that was very popular. A lot of the restaurants in the pavilions, again, tried to interest you in international cuisine. Morocco had some interesting tile work and all done on it, so it was a fun pavilion. So let me hop over to the next box of slides. And again, this is the Atomium. The buildings, I think it was called the Auditorium off to there to the left. Some of these things, again, were left from Expo 35 and jazzed up with new facades. The fountain, I think, had been there all the years between the fairs, reactivated with the water jets brought back to life and things going. The Esplanade, the Grand Palace again, you can barely see just off behind it some of the old building, but I think they did a beautiful job of camouflaging it with this facade that when you walk through it, you never realize you had this big hulking building that was 25 something years old with a totally different style of architecture hiding behind it. And just some more general views of the Skyway as we look around. Canada went with a real nautical motif. Excuse me one second. Again, lots of the countries are trying to show why you should partner with them. So if you wanted to get your goods into the United States, you could bring them over by ship to Canada, and Canada had excellent rail connections into all of the United States. So why not come and go to our ports? They're not all jammed up like some of the American ports are, and we'll be able to get your products to where you need to get them to. Tower here, the bell tower coming from the Vatican Pavilion. The tower off to the left, and talked before how people like to put towers at World's Fairs so everybody can know where their pavilions are. That's part of the Belgian Congo exhibit, as that big hall is behind it. And let's see, which one was this? I'll be honest with you, sometimes I know, sometimes I don't. Okay, so this is Luxembourg. Again, very modern style of a building. This was an interesting one. France went way out on an architectural design limb here with this building with a tremendous amount of open floor space inside. And if you look, there's a tower, yet another tower off to the left. That is basically steel cables pulled into that tower, and you can see some of them coming up right where my cursor is. They were holding up the roof of the building, so you didn't need a lot of heavy structural columns inside. So they did a heavy counterweight at the end of this pylon, so it was firmly anchored into the ground, and then use these cables to hold the roof of the building up. So very interesting style of how they did it. Down below in front of it is the Austria Pavilion. Lots of just street views over here. You had, again, the France Pavilion off to the left. We have one of the trams that goes through the fair. We'll see a real interesting head-on view of the tram later on. What's called the Philips Pavilion, just way off to the right. Philips being a major manufacturer of electrical appliances, that sort of thing in Europe. This is interesting for anybody that went to Expo 74. If you look down in the center of this would probably remind you of the famous butterflies at Expo 74. At times you would think that different World's Fair designers just must have seen something before in their research. And as soon as I saw this, it made me think of Expo 74. So this was signage pointing to different ways around the Expo 58 site. At Expo 74, they were covered in fabric, but they really reminded me very much of it. Again, Austria off to the left, the Philips Pavilion off to the right. Thailand with the walkway up behind it. We 64 World's Fair fans, of course, are real big on the luminaires. But one thing I forgot to do before this, by the way, was mute everybody. So if folks can just keep themselves muted, I'd appreciate it. These were street lights that lit up the site throughout the Expo 58 grounds. Kind of an interesting way that they were able to take their symbol and street lights and put them both together. You could get all sorts of souvenirs of the USSR, nesting dolls and that sort of thing. They also had all sorts of brochures that they gave out about the Soviet way of life. Here is the pylon at the France Pavilion. Again, they had some bells and loudspeakers up top, but the French flag hanging there as the building was held up from this. And we're hopping back over the US again. And kind of an interesting juxtaposition of just how close they were. You know, we're going literally off the grounds of the US Pavilion with a sea of American flags, and instantly there's the souvenir stand in the USSR Pavilion. After Expo 58 ended, by the way, the Russians, as they tended to do, took this pavilion down, transported it back to the USSR, and erected it at a park in Moscow. The Vatican Pavilion here, you had a giant bell tower that played throughout the day, and then in the back, we have some pictures later. We'll go inside the church facility itself. Another view of Canada. And we'll hop over to another bash here. Hope people are enjoying just how colorful Expo 58 was. So again, you had the Atomium up here in the center. You had a set of fountains that ran down around the axis of the fairs, gave it some nice feeling of movement with the water going through the fountains. The sky lift or the telelift off to the sides, either side actually of the fountain area. Oh, sorry, that was a little blurry. Back to the USA, yet another fashion show. That one's kind of blurry, we'll skip by. The Giant Spheres, I think it was 2004, roughly, that they did a massive overhaul of the Atomium. It had been closed for a number of years as it had some structural issues and just decay. They went through a 2-year refurbishment of it, and it looks just fabulous now. Japan Pavilion, nice garden out front, and inside displays as traditional about the countries do. Just more garden areas. This is a real short little box. We'll get over to another one here. Okay, so this particular one, these are some actually souvenir slides that were sold at Expo. This one is the modern sculpture of Christ at the Vatican Pavilion. And we're inside the Vatican Pavilion looking through it now. This is a display about popes through time with, you can see one of the papal hats over here and various things about the ones that have lived and contributed. We take a hop over to Japan, nice view outside with the garden. Overhead view of Thailand. You can see again the gardens area behind it. The trees, I think, made this a particularly nice thing. Belgian Congo, the tower we saw earlier in the big exhibit hall, one of those structural signs or direction signs off to the left. Happily, they numbered or labeled a bunch of the pavilions well, so I was easily able to figure out what some of these were, and I think you can figure this one out too. And we're back to the Congo again. Massive pavilion in terms of size, and the area that they got. The largest area at the fair was the Belgium area. The next size area was the foreign area. And third for the entire side of the fair was the Belgian Congo area. So they really put a lot of time and effort into it. This one's very interesting designs, the Cambodia Pavilion, designed with some ancient looking things that might be out of Angkor Wat type styling. A nighttime view of the Grand Palace, which was also called the reception area, major plaza when you came into it. And we're having big fun at night. You got fireworks going on. You got the Atomium lit up. The Belgian Congo area is nice. They also did some very interesting lighting, as you can see on the telelift towers. There's 2 of them lit up on either side of the Belgian Congo pylon. And they really glowed at night, making a tremendous line of lights throughout the area, which helped them, again, that they did not need to put street lighting out that would detract from the views during the day, that these things were lit up enough at night that they provided the walkway. Here you can see a stairway up to the Atomium. I don't know, I have not been in the Atomium myself. It was closed when I was in Brussels. I don't know if there's an elevator in it. Maybe somebody can shed some light on that, or you have to go up the stairs in or out. But in any case, there's a staircase at least for emergency exits. Nighttime view down below, some of Merry Belgium, their recreation of an ancient village, and behind it the very modern themed structure. More of it at night. Time lapse, you can see the things streaking by. That would be probably telelift cars. USA at night. All these fountains were movable, that they swiveled around so that they didn't just jet up. They actually gave you some vitality by spinning around. Switzerland, obviously, at night. We're back inside the USSR pavilion, and down below you can see a display of satellite technology, a cutaway there. We'll see one of their big displays coming up of Sputnik. Here's that same satellite again down below. They're very proud of the fact that they had been first in space with their satellite, and they were leading the way. And while America was showing how the women had nice frocks and silly dresses, Russia was really the place to go to if you wanted anything high tech. At least that's the message they were putting. Bunch of dignitaries out touring the sites. And again, if you needed something to drill a giant thing to explore your oil well capacity or whatever, just come on over and we'll fix you up. We also have very classy looking cars. I don't think that the 1958 American cars are probably selling a little bit better and certainly a lot more stylish, but if you wanted to get a very functional car, they were glad to sell it to you. Construction view, again, as mentioned, this was souvenir site set, so that they were taking some of these as they were still setting things up. So loading all the displays inside the pavilion. The base of the Atomium, nice that they had a bank that you could finance your day there at the Expo. And just continuing to hop around the grounds. Get an idea how big this is. It looks like there's somebody standing up on a railing up here, the giant spheres. A close-up view of one of those arches that I mentioned. They had the signs pointing their way around things in the various wings of these signs. There were also color themes to the area. I don't remember offhand which was the red zone, which was the blue zone, which was the yellow, but again, it was a way of helping you get back to the various zones of the Expo. Woman on the left looks like she has been having a very fun day at Expo. The feet are up, the head is back, the eyes are closed. The lady on the right is resting her feet as well. And I think all of us that have tramped around fairgrounds or Disney parks can well empathize with the need to sometimes have some quiet time. Great view here looking down. You have the telelift station down below where it came running in. Again, during the construction phase, all sorts of trucks all over. You can see all the trams were staged off to the left-hand side, getting ready for opening day. When they did have opening day, of course, you brought in all sorts of dignitaries to do it and bring them all in from, this is the King of Belgium passing in review, a soldier saluting him, coming in for opening day. One of the old buildings again behind it. So a big major thing for them to be able to hold this first post-World War II Expo was really a tremendous achievement for Belgium to do this. Flags of the nations that were participating, costumes that were styled to each of the various countries, and quite a crowd all coming in on opening day. You can imagine the backers of the fair were quite glad to see that the attendance was just as expected. Matter of fact, Expo 58 did very well in terms of attendance and was a success for the organizers. So part of the opening day festivities. Various costumes of them. And back out into the world of the Expo. Again, the giant tower that holds up the roof of the France Pavilion. By now, everybody knows which one this is. Lots of restaurants and cafes, some of them within the pavilions, as mentioned. Others were outside standalone structures. A number of them were full-service restaurants. Others were more of a buffet. Get your tray, bring it out, sit down, and enjoy yourself. And there were areas that were just total walk up to the window, get your sausage, and sit down in the trees and enjoy yourself. Great flower details all throughout the area for color. I don't know what became of the telelift system after the fair. So many of these things are generally repurposed and sold someplace else. So if anybody knows where it did end up, please let me know. A nice aerial view down below. You can see Merry Belgium. There's talk in some places that parts of the facades were done with the molds that had previously been used for 39 and then reused in 64. I don't know if that's true or not. Some of the buildings look very, very familiar, particularly things like the bridge in the center of it, the gateway into it. They may be just generic designs, though. There's certainly no Caroline Tower, no giant city hall that's in it, but it was a very popular area. And evidently they had these at, as I mentioned, every 25 years they had been doing celebrations of the company's founding. Evidently they had been doing Period Village all throughout these 25-year expositions, but really went all out with this Merry Belgium section. They had a heliport at the fair. In the background, you can see the rotor ride. Again, this is right near the amusement area. But if you were wealthy, you could go fly into Brussels and then take the helicopter right out to the fairgrounds, just like you could do at the 64 fair, except this one landed on the ground, not on top of one of the buildings. And again, amusement type stuff out here. Again, souvenirs of the USSR pavilion. I don't know what's in the bottles. They were 30 francs, 130 francs, it looks like. Maybe they were genuine souvenirs of Russian vodka or something, but people are lined up. It's very interesting to see. Every picture you come across that shows the souvenir stand, there was quite a crowd gathering around it. So again, if your intent is to get your country's message out to the rest of the world, it shows how successful some of these pavilions were. Because you could go on all the pavilions for free, but here people are lining up to buy stuff. And the constant line at the USSR souvenir stand, I don't think the USA pavilion had anything comparable to it. So I think the souvenir stand was actually an afterthought because it's not in the first few early pictures I have of the USSR pavilion. But once they put it in there, it was a hit from day one. Because like I said, I can't think I have a picture that shows it empty. They had different clowns that would come out and entertain on the ground. So this guy's out there. I don't know quite what he's doing. It looks like a giant bobby pin in his hand as a microphone, and maybe he's supposed to be on TV or something. But they had all sorts of street entertainment out there keeping people going. You had push chairs. If you wanted to get a trip around Expo, you could walk around, or you could take a tram ride around, or you could come out and get this fleet of cars, push cars that you would get in, and these guys would pedal you around. And obviously, they're all free, waiting for their first riders of the day. Great way to get around. Trouble with getting around in a chair like that is you can look at the streets in a day like this and you can figure out what sort of luck would you have getting one of those push cars through these crowds. They had a bell or a signal device, but you saw how crowded the picture was on opening day. Just the thought of being able to get through there was daunting. And those push cars don't actually show up in a tremendous number of pictures. As a result, there's just way too many of them. Way too many people. I mean, again, here's the crowd. Try to get a push chair through that, right? Big, again, overhead view. We're looking at the Grand Palace Pavilion. You can see the front facade that was put on it for the Expo 58. How big those pavilions were. And again, they were used for all sorts of industrial and trade shows. And outside these brown buildings down below, that's right at the perimeter, those brown buildings are not part of Expo 58. So just like in Queens, you could walk across the street from your apartment and go to the World's Fair. You could do the same thing here in Expo 58. Off to the right, you can see a bunch of amusement area rides, things over there. Oh, our clown is back. He's certainly entertaining, isn't he? Very, very popular ride. It was very interesting that if you look at this, for my Disney friends, you think about it, this is 1958, a tubular steel roller coaster. We're sort of looking at a Matterhorn without a Matterhorn, aren't we? I mean, it's pretty much the exact same ride system. They're in their sled, they're going through the area. So you have something like this, and it shows this really thrilling roller coaster, but just think how much more interesting this thing is if you put it inside a fake Matterhorn and do some heavy-duty theming to it. Lots of gardens were around the site. As mentioned earlier, they had all the old trees and everything around, but they also went and put some formal gardens in the various pavilions, and you can see tables ringing it for a place to sit down and relax. and grab a bite to eat. There's also a large stadium. This had been, again, a pre-Expo 58 structure. So opening ceremonies, things like that could be held here. They also had a number of different performances by various organizations. Various nations came in, could entertain here at the stadium. Very large facility. Merry Belgium just above it. Oh, my goodness, the United States Pavilion. And what do we have? Yet another fashion show. Thank goodness Disney salvaged their butt for them by putting in America the Beautiful. Just a display inside. Again, opening day, we're going to have all our dignitaries come in and talk to us about what's so good about this. This is the royal family here. Back to the U.S. More U.S. I'll just kind of skip through some of these. Ah, another fashion show. Another fashion show. Fountains, without the fountains running, so very early shot. It's interesting when you see some of the early shots, like this one again is pre-opening when they're starting to pose people. They had not got all the flags of the states up. Matter of fact, I don't even think the flagpoles have been put in place around the building yet. But I mock the fashion shows mercilessly because they seem silly to me, but obviously people were attracted to them, came in and enjoyed them. Putting the displays together pre-opening day. This is one of the things was a children's playground inside the American exhibit. You could come in and park your kids for a little while. There was an interactive area. You could do coloring, all sorts of things. Take your artwork home with you at the end. You get another aerial view looking down below. All sorts of different things. You can see the spire sticking up over there for the France Pavilion. The royal family waiting for a motorcade to come by as the various nations were ready to show off their pavilions. The fun zone, more traditional roller coaster up above, the steel beam one over to the left. This is the Vatican Pavilion on the outside. This particular one is the Arab States Pavilion. Iran had a very impressive pavilion. I think the Shah was still in power at this point in time. This is one of the walkways. You could go up to the promenade up above. They had the various staircases, or you could walk down below. And this was really a great idea because you had so many people. If you did not have a multi-level staircase system in some of these areas, some of the walkways could have been very congested. But just like we have dual lane highways in certain parts of the US, you have dual level walkways here, which got people through it. The restaurant in the background, some flower beds, lighthouse. I don't remember what the lighthouse was symbolizing. Very blurry nighttime picture of the British Pavilion at night. That ends that batch. How are we doing time-wise? Okay. All right. All right, so if you walk in here, you get an idea of the Belgium exhibit. They were, again, trying to show Brussels is central to Belgium, and Belgium is central to Europe. You've got Germany, you've got France, Holland, everybody around us. You can get your stuff to us because look at all of our train lines that run all over the place. If you can get your goods anywhere within Belgium, we can get them to Brussels. Brussels, we can get them out to the ports out there up at the North Sea, and we can get them anywhere in the world for you. Oh, little tour guide pictures, tourists threw in there, downtown Brussels and City Hall. This particular one, I believe this was let me look at my notes here real quick. So many of them after a while that they blur into a thing. Yep, so, let's see. So I didn't print out my notes for this one. So they're telling us to relax. I believe this is one of the train stations where you went in. I'm not entirely sure. Again, looking across the flowers, they changed them throughout the year or out the season as they needed to do. Kept the grounds looking nice and clean. Some sculptures. They didn't do a lot with sculptures, which was interesting. You had such a big thing at the 39 World's Fair in New York and again out in San Francisco with sculptures. They tended to go with some of these bigger, like these white ones on either side of the fountains. There's a couple statues and everything, but they didn't really go for the amount of statues or murals, things like that, that we've seen in a lot of other fairs. Tending the gardens. This photographer was obviously very much into flowers. The electrical industry pavilion again off to the right there. Another fashion show. And this is not a fashion show. I'm trying to remember which one. I think I labeled this. Let's see. Let me sneak here. Textile section, the Hall of Fine Arts. Okay. Again, each of the pavilions were encouraged to bring in dance troupes, performers, everything from the country, because if your family was going to go dance in Expo, then maybe your neighbors would come over and see you. You would certainly be encouraged to come over. Like most cases, the performers got a free ticket into Expo. The families and everybody else had to come in and pay to see them. Big exhibit here. You can see you can buy an ambulance. You could get all sorts of things. I mentioned Philips earlier was a major manufacturer over there. Interesting mural inside the pavilion. Looking down at the base of the Atomium. You can see again the walkway to nowhere. It basically just comes out, goes to the end, and then you can walk down to the various pavilions. You could get some nice views from the Atomium. Out behind it, you can see how rural and everything was out in this part of France, Belgium rather. Not a lot built out there. Again, a nice view of Merry Belgium. I believe it was free admission into Merry Belgium as opposed to the Belgian village, but look how big this is. This goes all the way around here, and then it goes all the way back up here. It was a tremendous area. It was also open very late at night. A lot of the nightclubs and everything at Expo 58 stayed open as late as 4 a.m. So the people like to come out, party, make it a big thing for enjoying themselves. Down below this giant globe here of the world is Pan American World Airways, trying to position themselves as a great way to get from anywhere to anywhere by Pan Am. Again, here's Pan Am again down below. This is the so-called international area, which is again different from the foreign area. So this big blue dome here area is the United Nations, which looks very, very much just exactly like the United Nations Pavilion that you would have seen if you went to Expo 85 in Tsukuba, Japan. Up here with the red edges to it is the International Red Cross. So again, a lot of the international things that not a country, but different things that would benefit the world were all grouped together in this one particular area. And you could go inside pavilions and be treated to snack bars, restaurants, that sort of thing, besides just displays about the organization. They were all trying to raise money, and a great way to do it was come in and have something to eat. Lots of shots of the same things as people see them. And again, this is, again, to me, the sort of thing that makes a pavilion or an Expo 58 pretty, that it's not just concrete, it's not just steel, it's not just the future. I'm a real big believer in flowers. If you look right here in the middle, I think this is called an aluminum plant, which became a big hit up in Seattle just 4 years later, that they had a bunch of these things all growing. So it's, again, stuff that we had not seen traditionally here in American gardens. People would come over, see these, and import them back into US motifs. And this is, again, the Disney Circle-Rama Pavilion. Not a lot of signage on it, which was surprising, but they didn't need to have as much signage because word of mouth became a huge thing. Here's the line of people all waiting to get in and see America the Beautiful. Today, of course, these white walls would be covered with all sorts of posters with the Disney name, and the famous Disney, type font or something, posters of, scenes from the movie or whatever. But out front was just a sign about America the Beautiful. I don't even think it mentioned the Disney name on the sign. And next show time in X number of minutes, and it was packed all the time. Back inside. After Expo 58 ended, this upper level where all the glass here was taken out. The lower level of the pavilion was maintained and is a radio station. So you can still go into the basement level of the U.S. Pavilion, but the above ground piece was raised after the fair. For all my fellow fans of postmodern architecture, I'm sure they're all looking at the chairs, trying to figure out how to get one of them home. Again, USSR on the left. Again, you can see people for the souvenir stand. Arab states in the center, and America off to the right. And Russia had all sorts of displays about tractors and all sorts of things. Again, combines, reapers, industrial might. Hungary in the background. More Czechoslovakia. Back inside Russia, we have power plants, we have turbines, we have all sorts of things you'd like to get. I don't know, I mean, some of our friends here on the call have the luminaries at home in their backyard. I don't know if anybody has any Expo 58 luminaries in their yard. It's kind of a neat design. Here's somebody getting the ride in the push chair up above. They had a nice empty day that day. Vatican Pavilion, bell tower. Again, down at the ground level for the Vatican. And inside, a church services were held here just like they were done at the 64 World's Fair. They had a contingent of priests that were stationed there, but various nations, again, would have priests from their countries come in and hold services here as well. Back then, I think all the masses were probably still being done in Latin, so it probably was as incomprehensible to everybody as it was to me as a kid when I went to the church and it was all in Latin. One of the few statues on the grounds outside the Vatican Pavilion. And again, you can see how big some of these pavilions were. That's the France Pavilion, again, held up by that giant pylon. Look at the size of the people and you can realize how big this thing is inside. Long line of people waiting to get in. France, as you might expect, had a very nice restaurant. It was on the back side of the pavilion, not seen here, but a very nice restaurant that was well received and sort of on the expensive side if you looked at the guidebook. But they also had a cheaper cafe area where you could sit outdoors and just enjoy the view. And inside France, you could see all the various things France had to offer you. You had rocket planes and drones down below. You had shipping lines. You had all sorts of things, the bullet trains that they were just starting to put into place, the high-speed train system. They had shipping lines. They were talking about satellites. If you needed anything, you could come into France and we could find a way to build it for you. Israel had a popular pavilion, again, nestled right in the trees. And they were talking again about the founding of Israel, their ongoing issues of trying to support themselves in the political environment they were dealing with, and also the economic area of trying to build a new nation from scratch. Still a very young country at this point in time. And if you were hungry, again, great spot. You could get a lot of these places to be more than glad to feed you. And again, inside Israel, talking about how they're using water and that to try to change the barren area into something useful for the country. Mentioned before, UK had two exhibits. This is the government one. Kind of striking, but if you walked up to it, there's very little signage that would tell you why on earth, this is the UK. I also don't think the UK is being a particularly mountainous nation. So when I first looked at this, my first thought would have been Switzerland or some alpine nation, but this indeed was Great Britain. And this is the other one of their pavilions, the larger of the two, British industry. Just like France has been trying to tell you that they had all these great trains and rockets and everything else, you could see the same thing when you went into British industry. Another view is a German pavilion. We had seen it before on the garden side. This is on the street side. And walkways connecting the buildings together. And I'm going to cheat here and look at the name, see what the lighthouse is. Netherlands. Okay, so Netherlands was showing us something to do with the sea here. Austria, very modern. Again, all these countries, you had some that were very traditional in design, like Thailand with their Cambodia, some of those. But a lot of these were very modern things trying to show that their country was right at the cutting edge. We can compete with any of the big boys. Come over to us and we'll take care of you. Because again, the big thing for doing a World's Fair is, besides entertaining the crowds, it's attracting more business, both economic development and tourism into your country. Portugal, Yugoslavia. You can see again how sleek and stylish most of these pavilions went with their design. Some went with a more traditional wooden design or theme design of their country. This particular one is Finland. So Finland has lots of trees generate lots of lumber. If you're thinking about lumber, maybe you'd be thinking about Finland, just as you walk up to the building, even before you get inside. Big plaza up above, flags of the participating nations. And again, they did have some sculptures, some traditional and some modern ones, but nothing on the scope or grandeur that they had at others. And this is, again, I mentioned before, you had all sorts of sit-down restaurants, or you could just come up here and get a quick little snack. I got a kick out of this one. I don't know who thought it was a good idea to put a scale in front of a place where you're going to eat. So I don't know if people would walk up here and get on the scale and decide that they were going to pass up on an ice cream or something else, but it just kind of struck me as a strange thing that you had a scale sitting next to a snack bar. I don't think that would be a spot I would put mine today. Off to the side, you see the sign for the day nursery. You could come out, park your kids, take your tour, and take your day around Expo. And this particular one, as I mentioned, how they built the Expo throughout the forested grounds. If you look at the tree off to the right, you can actually see it actually goes through the roof of the snack bar. And that, I think, is a real testament that they didn't cut down pesky trees that got in the way of commerce. They found a way to make their site plan work with the area that they wanted to maintain. Because after the 6 months of Expo, all this was going to be torn down. It's nice that they just didn't leave scorched earth behind, that they left the forest grove still intact. Yeah, and all sorts of things with the various issues running at a time, so I'm going to have to hop through here real fast. I'm trying to remember which, somebody actually has a birdhouse in here for your pigeons. So if you're going to have homing pigeons or ever come back, you have an area for them to come back to. International area, come on, hitting the mouse too quick. Again, we had international area, Rotary International is one of them. You could come out for different service organizations and see it. IBM, again, trying to make a big thing about modernizing the world, and they didn't just, although they were an American company, they didn't just participate with a display in the American pavilion. They went all out and built this in their own pavilion because they were trying to show they were an international company, not an American company. And this was, again, the days the computers were just becoming big. Beforehand, they had tabulators and card sorters and all that. But now we're having computers and databases, and you could come in and see a real life computer, which was probably the first time many people had ever been in the room with a computer. Transportation, you can see a big thing here, a full-size airplane on display. They also had full-size trains, everything again about how big Belgium was as a transportation hub to the rest of the world. So you had real trains brought in from different countries put on display. You could walk through them. They mentioned before they extended a rail line out to Expo for bringing these in, but they did not have regular rail service out to Expo. You took a tram out to the area. And a business lounge coming in, you can see all sorts of things again and why you would want to do business in Belgium. They really spent a tremendous amount of money on the Belgian displays. The traditional roller coaster in front of us, all sorts of other rides, everything's crammed in there. Interesting, unlike a lot of the other fairs, they did not have a lot of booths of Game of Chance and that sort of thing. So you don't tend to see people walking around the same stuffed dolls and animals that you might have done at Expo or even at 62 World's Fair in New York, that sort of thing. But kind of a neat roller coaster, traditional wooden one. I think people enjoy that. More of the, you can see the trains down below, various, the stadiums off to the right, garden area. There is one slide that's before I run out of time. I have to go look for it that mentioned the trams, and I have a shot of the front end of one of the trams. I'm gonna have to go find that real quick. I'll mention Belgian, Merry Belgium as they called it, so we're inside that now. Little stand there selling food. But if you looked at some of these, you could be mistaken thinking that you were back in Belgian Village in '64. Cobblestone streets. And the bridge area looks very familiar if you compare it to the ones that were in the bridge that was in the '64 fair. And we're saying goodbye to Expo at night. Into Brussels itself, all sorts of nice nighttime motif. Close-up view of the map. Site plan. And I'm going to leave you looking at the site plan for just a moment while I jump in here. I have to find this one slide that I think you'll get a kick out of. I have many more pictures. We're going to stop now just so we don't go crazy. This one I got a kick out of. Volkswagen actually came up with this tram system. For anybody that's a Volkswagen fan, could you imagine if you were just able to drive down the street in the cab of this thing? I mean, it looks like a Volkswagen on steroids, doesn't it? It's a very unique system. There were actually two different tram systems that I've seen at Expo 58. The Volkswagen was one, and then a more traditional tug type one in other shots. But turns out that they made very few of these particular Volkswagen tugs for it in the Volkswagen group. If you want to watch people salivate, you just post a picture of this, and it's a kind of rare, unique part of Volkswagen history. And if you look closely, you can also notice it's a genuine Volkswagen convertible, because the roof would come down for a nice day, so the driver could be riding himself around. So let me stop sharing at that point. Like I said, I hope people enjoyed the whirlwind tour, and I apologize for jumping to and from the United States back and forth. That's actually about 20% of the slides I have of Expo, so I won't subject to all the rest of them. But I had not obviously gone to Expo. I was 6-year-old when it was held, but my aunt went, and we would loan her the family movie camera when she went on her tours. And I must get the pictures of it digitized that she took going through Expo. And it really helped spark my interest in World's Fairs, because she came back, we saw the movies, you know, looked at it. The buildings, of course, are different than any of the buildings that were around me in Brooklyn at the time. And over the years, she ended up giving me her Expo 58 souvenirs. So I still have her guidebook for the US Pavilion, the USSR Pavilion, General Pavilion, all that sort of stuff. So, oh yeah, see, Jean's holding up one of them over there. So, like I said, even as a kid, it just struck me that this was a really different sort of spot. So when all of a sudden I had my first chance to go to a World's Fair, and I remember going there to, one of the days with my aunt, and we were discussing it. So I still have all her Expo 58 souvenirs, and I give it great credit for sparking my interest. So appreciate folks joining, and I think everybody's able to unmute themselves if you would like to go. Oh, I see Greg has his hand up. So Greg, go ahead, sir.
Hello.
There you are. Okay. It's a little bit of a
Is
lag.
this thing on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. Is this thing on? Okay. I actually have something to contribute to this. Ready?
It's about time.
Okay. I was tardy. First of all, I want to say happy birthday to Carol. It's my first thing. Second thing is I was tardy, so I have detention. But I want to ask if you talked about the U.S. Pavilion, which I assume you did. I have a record album here that is the Jan Clayton Carousel album on Disneyland Records that ties in with the Brussels World's Fair. This is the first time this album was issued. This is the very first Disneyland Records stereophonic album. And it was recorded to tie in with the fact that they were doing Carousel at the US Pavilion. That's what it says on the back. And it was reissued about 4 times with different covers that didn't mention the Brussels World's Fair. But that was originally the reason. I don't know if they sold it there. I assume they did, but they certainly sold it at Disneyland and everywhere else.
Now, what's I probably have it buried somewhere. I haven't listened in years. What sort of songs or entertainment is on there, Greg?
It's the score of Carousel, but it's a Tutti Camerata version with the Gloria Wood Choir, and it is a beautifully done, completely original version made for Disney for the records. It was reissued with a book on the Buena Vista label with illustrations made for the album. And then it was reissued in the 60s on a single album on the Disneyland label. So it was a long seller for a couple of decades. But the original LP was released as the very first Disneyland stereophonic record, and it tied in with the Brussels World's Fair because Jan Clayton, who played the mom on Lassie originally, was the star of Carousel on Broadway. She was the original star on stage on Broadway. And she did that there. And I guess she was a friend of Tootie's, and she recorded it for Disney for that purpose. It was unofficially reissued as a CD in England, which is not illegal to do in England because there's a 50-year rule with reissues for copyrights, but it has not been reissued here. And there's a little sad note to it as well. There's a famous soliloquy in Carousel that Billy Bigelow, who is the sort of anti-hero lead, sings when he learns that he's going to his wife is going to have a child, and it ends with a melody called "My Little Girl." And this is the only version of the Carousel score where "My Little Girl" is sung as a song on its own, and that was done because Jan Clayton had just lost her daughter in a horrible traffic accident.
Oh.
And so she sang it and dedicated it to her daughter on this album.
That's something. Thanks for adding that. I was just as Greg was talking, going through some of the questions in chat. Jim Brown had asked where the site was. If I remember, the number is 4.3 miles to the northeast of Brussels. And again, somebody else put a link in there. You can go see it. And again, today with Google Earth and everything, you get a very nice view of what the park area looks like today. And it's nice, again, that they did not pave this over and turn it into a giant industrial park or anything. Somebody mentioned Erg. It's very odd that you never see a sunny day in all these photos. You know, if you've been to Brussels, it's not the sunniest city in the world. I don't know, being right off the, the north, not far at all from the North Sea or something. It's not right on it, but yeah, gray and gloomy. And also, I think in some cases, it was probably nicer than it looks, and people kind of blew the sky out with some of their photography. and not really setting the exposure right for some of it. So there are a few days where it is great and glorious and sunny, but it's not I don't think many people go to Brussels for a suntan. So. And then I think Derek, no, Carlos mentioned, yeah, the telelift ride wasn't hung very high. It wasn't. Very low ride. Matter of fact, you can see it going underneath the elevated walkways. But it was basically a way to get people from one side to the other. Randy confirmed that there is an elevator within the Atomium. I thought there had to be. Elevator, but not to the top. Thanks, Cass. Any audio, video, or the dark ride attractions we had in New York? Is there any much video? You mean any such video? The audio, video, and dark ride attractions we had in New York. What do you mean about that, Jim?
I'm talking about things like the People Wall or the GE. No, it's where you ride a vehicle through a show building, or where there's multi-image slideshows, films, things that we nowadays associate with World's Fairs and Disney.
No, basically for Expo 58, I don't think there were any ride systems within any of the pavilions. And if I'm wrong, somebody please correct me, but it was pretty much walk in, see an exhibit. And that's part of what made the Circarama thing so popular, was that they actually had a movie to immerse you in it. Most of the other pavilions, if you look real quick on one shot of the Vatican Pavilion, there was a door auditorium. And they went in, a lot of these people had slideshows and things that were showing, but they had not commissioned full blown movies that were as popular, as immersive as Disney. There's certainly nothing like the ride system for Futurama or the Ford Pavilion, things along that line. Interior shots of Expo 58, again, we saw most of them that I showed were inside some of the Belgian pavilions because they were fairly well lit. A lot of the others were hard to get, because again, film was very, very bad back in 1958 in terms of light sensitivity. So if you walked in and you only had 20 pictures on your roll of Kodachrome, and you walked in where you're going to take a picture inside the Portugal Pavilion or something, maybe if you were from Portugal, you did. Most people tended to go outside because you just couldn't get good shots with the interior lighting, with your little, back then it was even before flash cubes. You'd had to carry a flash bulb, pop it out, put another one in. So not a lot of interior stuff. We see Harold had his hand up here patiently, and then we'll get to Dave. So Harold.
Okay, just one other interesting facet of Expo 58 in Brussels regarding the Cold War, and there was something called the Dr. Zhivago affair. And it turned out that the novel Dr. Zhivago had been published by an Italian publisher. It couldn't be published in Russia. The authorities just censored it and said, no, we don't want anything like that, critical of the revolution and so on. And so it was published in Italy, and the CIA got word of it. And they thought, well, this would be an interesting way to battle the propaganda of the Soviet Union at the World's Fair. So they had a special run of the novel in a Russian translation, and they made arrangements. They thought it would be too difficult to just distribute it through the United States Pavilion, being so close to the USSR one. They got the agreement of the Vatican City Pavilion, that when Vatican City staff would see some Russian tourists that were in the pavilion, they'd just invite them over to the library and say, oh, we have a little gift for you. And it was a Russian language version of Dr. Zhivago, which they could then smuggle back into the Soviet Union. And it was a blue covered binding. And there were many cases of these blue bindings being torn off the books, and then the books just split the bindings so the visitors, the Russian visitors, could hide them in their pockets and smuggle them back into the Soviet Union. And that's how Dr. Zhivago, the novel, first got into the Soviet Union over the watchful eyes of the KGB at that time.
Wow, that's interesting. I had not known that. Thank you.
Yeah, and if anybody wants some more detail on it, I just Googled it just before the presentation. And if you just Google Zhivago, Brussels, and the first thing that comes up is a Washington Post article from 2014, which gives you the whole story. So that's an interesting thing to look at, just how international relations in the Cold War was affected by Expo 58.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I see another one here. We'll get to you in 1 second, Dave. Wayne Brettle had asked about, he mentioned the color of these slides is great. How much restoration was needed? I'm going to take you behind the scenes into my workshop for just a second and give you an idea. Basically, what I do is when I work on with some of these pictures, I do scan on them on my Nikon. I generally use the Nikon scanner, and it has a feature for taking off dirt and scratches, which does a pretty good job, not everything, and also can do color restoration. So in this particular case, this is a scan that the Nikon's attempt has done color restoration. You can see it's not quite all there yet, but it's a heck of a lot better than what the original slide was. So a lot of the slides that you saw today started looking something like this. And again, what I'll do is I'll do multiple scans of the different ones, and I'll use different tools to try to recreate it. Not all of them are quite as bad as some of these, but again, this is one I'll throw into Photoshop, and when I work on it, I've got to take out all the dirt and scratches that are up at the center here. And I've got to turn the water back into blue, the sky hopefully into blue. So it takes probably about, on a slide like this, about 20 minutes per slide to get it back into some sort of semblance for looking good. If I just grab another set real quick, and again, try to show you, this again is the way the Nikon scanner first sees some of these slides. A lot of them have tended to fade, either the non-Kodak ones tend to fade very red. If it's ectochrome, they tend to go to a bluish hue. The Nikon scanner then says, well, I'll try to take some of the blue out. These chairs should be more white. Obviously, this is kind of a crappy one because it's out of focus. But if you look what happens when you take the blue out, it really makes the red flowers go insane. So I tend to do most of my work by hand and not go with the Nikon's attempt. What I do use the Nikon's attempt for is a picture like this, where it's very, very dark. At times, the Nikon is better. Excuse me, hiccups. The Nikon's better for pulling out some of the details here, which again I'll get into with the hand tuning. So again, it takes about 20 minutes or so a picture, and sometimes I've been known to go way, way hell down a rabbit hole just for the heck of doing it. So Dave, you had your hand up.
Same question. You just answered it. Thanks.
Ah, boy, mind reading.
Yeah, no, great job. Those slides just great. So, attaboy.
Well, I mentioned, I'll get to you in 1 second, Randy. I mentioned past talks. I got into this, my brother Jim and I had gone to Philmont Scout Ranch in 1967. Excuse me. And I took my set of pictures, and Jim had taken his. Welcome to the land of low humidity. My brother had lost his pictures, and he said, hey, do you have pictures of our trip? And I took mine out, and they had faded and they gotten scratched and everything over the years. So I started getting into how do I bring back this copy of these pictures, so I could make them for my brother Jim. And I had at that time an HP PhotoSmart, which had no technology in it whatsoever, other than it did an okay scan, I think about 1200 DPI. And then one day on the internet, I saw someone mention the amazing Nikon CoolScan 4 scanner that took dirt and dust off automatically. And I said, there's no way it could possibly do that, because I was having to take every single little piece of dust and dirt out by hand. I went on, I saw a video of the Nikon, and I said, that can't be real. It's got to be bullshit. I mean, nothing could do that. Well, I've got 3 of them sitting in my office now, and they are the greatest electronic piece of marvel that I have ever seen, because it does an amazing job. It actually shines, it does a scan of the slide, but besides taking a picture of the slide that we see, it shoots an infrared light through the slide, or the negative. I can't do black and white negatives. The infrared beam goes through it and it says, oh, at this point, this must be a scratch because I'm getting too much light. In this area, this must be dirt because I'm not getting enough. And it does an interpolation of trying to fill in the dirt and scratch. And it's astonishing. It takes out 90% of the dirt and scratches on these slides. I would have given up, or I'd be in an insane asylum. if I had to do it without. So if anybody's looking to get a scanner, Nikon's unfortunately doesn't make them anymore. You can get them on the used market. Epson makes some pretty good scanners that have what they call digital ice built into them. And they can also do flatbed scanners, things like that. So if you're interested in getting your pictures done on my worldspherephotos.com main page, there's a page up there about how I restore these things, some of the tools I use. And like I said, I enjoy it. When I'm doing this, I'm taking a scratch across somebody's face and trying to fix it. I'm not worried about politics or vaccine shots or, any of that stuff. So to me, it was a real safety valve for my day job. So Randy, you had your hand up?
Yeah, the Brussels World's Fair was the first fair I became aware of, other than the 1939 San Francisco Exposition, which my mother had attended. My third grade teacher, Miss Edson, had gone to Expo 58 and showed us her color slides as part of a classroom project. And I became really interested in it. And later on, I actually did a lot of research on it. You mentioned, for instance, the German pavilion having multi-buildings connected by bridges. There was actually a reason for that. Most of the international or foreign section for 58 was held on the grounds of the Royal Palace, which is adjacent to the Expo site. The king allowed them to take a certain number of acres, but the understanding was you could not remove any trees. You could do underbrush, you could do smaller pines, but no trees could be removed. And plus it was kind of hilly, so they had to build around trees basically. And that's where some of these pavilions their design came from, was building around existing trees. You mentioned that one snack bar had a tree going through the roof, and that would have been the reason. You have a couple minutes, because a couple other things, I took some notes. Let's see, in the US pavilion versus the USSR, I think this started the US policy of soft sell versus hard sell, because Expo 67, the same thing. There was, a little bit of space stuff up on the top of the dome in Expo 67. Same thing for Expo 70. There was definitely the moon rock and some space junk, as they often call it. But most of it was, cultural stuff, artwork, clothing, that kind of stuff. So, it's this particular pavilion started that process of soft sell versus hard sell for the US. I know the US took a lot of criticism for it a lot of times, but I think it worked overall. France had lots of issues during its construction. It was built on the lowest point of the site, and they had a lot of rain the winter before, and all the water accumulated right where the French pavilion was going to be. They actually already started construction, but a lot of it started to sink, so they had to go in and beef up a lot of that, I guess you call it truss or whatever system they used to support it. And I actually believe it opened a week or two late. I could be wrong on that. And of course, Phillips was the standout pavilion architecturally, that glass tent. Are you still there? I'm being a blurry. No
Yeah.
picture. Okay. Yeah, I don't see you anymore.
I'm here.
The plaza that you see in front of the US pavilion, US was applauded for keeping that land open for a plaza. Soviet Union built right up to the border of its allotted area, and of course benefited from the US pavilion's plaza because it gave it a vantage point, which it would not have had otherwise. Let's see. A US pavilion had a brass rail restaurant in it. Somewhere I've got a menu from it. Of course, not the bubble style we saw in New York, but that was a restaurant that the US had in as part of its pavilion. And then lastly, you had some pictures of the Congo exhibit. It became very controversial. When it first opened, they had a zoo. And part of the zoo included, they brought people in from the Belgian, it was the Belgian Congo at the time. And they were part of the zoo. They lived in huts. They were behind a low fence. They went about their daily activities. Visitors came in and threw bananas at them. And shortly thereafter, they closed that portion. They kept the animal portion and the flora and fauna area open, but they closed the human zoo as it became known. And like I said, it was a huge controversy. I think that's what I have to add. But anyway, I had a great presentation, Bill. I love some of the pictures you had. Several I had never seen before. So you did a great job.
I appreciate it. You know, it's actually interesting. I do have quite a few pictures of the Congo area on slides that I just ran out of time for today. And just as you mentioned, in the early part, you can see, oh yeah, I contributed to that book. I wish I could read it.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great book. I don't know if it's still available. It was issued for the 50th anniversary of the fair. And the back section has a big part about the reconstruction of the Atomium.
That's in Dutch, right?
No, mine's in English.
Oh, the publisher sent me a Dutch copy. So I've looked at it, not knowing what I was looking at on half the thing. No, I have some pictures from early Expo 58. And as you mentioned, in the Congo area, they had the people on display, which was really, really tacky. And then for the rest of it, it's just empty huts and an empty village, which looks like, you know, a recreation. But, you know, as you mentioned, they did that, you know, so many of the early fairs. They brought the American Indians into the, what you call it, you know, Chicago World's Fair and have them living on site, you know, that sort of thing. And, you know, there's terrible things they did in certain areas. You know, I still feel uncomfortable, honest with you, when I look at the New York World's Fair pictures and the guys outside dressed as the Great White Hunter, and you've got the Watusi warriors trying to get you to come into the African pavilion. So, you know, things that, you know, it's just struck me wrong years before everything we've been going through today. It's, you know, it's just, you got to look at it back at the time they did it, I guess. Now, somebody mentioned here well, about scanners. And let me just pop up real quick here, share screen. Okay, this is the page from my website. You can see up at the top, worldsfairphotos.com, restoration, and then you can go through it. But I basically show, you know, if you put the picture in, like the top one is just a raw scan. When you throw it in through the Nikon scanner, all of a sudden it starts taking out all the dirt and scratches. And I go through it again, how you can take a blue picture, you can turn into a semi picture in the middle, and then how I end up with the final version down below. So if anybody is interested, I turned green again.
Well, it's back now.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what it is.
I'm green with envy. I don't know. It's funny. I never see myself turn green on it. But if anybody is interested in trying to restore your own pictures or anything, please do let me know. I'll be glad to try to help get you started. If you have a small number of pictures you just want to have experimented on to see what can be done, get in touch with me. I can scan them for you and send them back. And I try to encourage people, not just for your World's Fair shots, but, you know, the pictures of you and your siblings and everybody else, you know, scan them and get them digitized now, because film does not last forever. And it's astonishing, like I just showed earlier, some of these pictures in 50 years have totally lost their color. Through the computer, you can bring back, in most cases, you can bring them back to a pretty good facsimile, but wait another 10 years and you might not be able to do it then. So, you know, somebody else is mentioning here, they use Paint Shop Pro. I generally use Photoshop. Paint Shop Pro is an excellent tool, a lot cheaper than Photoshop. If I had not already heavily gotten into Photoshop, I may have stayed with it. But really encourage people to dig into the shoe boxes and the photo albums out in the, you know, the closet, dig them out and get them before they're gone.
Bill?
You have to have a very, very understanding wife like the birthday girl. Because every day she says, oh, you got some more packages in the mail. So, yeah, Don?
I'm curious, you mentioned to use the scratch and dirt removal in your scanner. Do you find it superior to Photoshop's scratch and dirt removal, which I use a lot?
Yeah, no, I mean, hardware dirt and scratch removal, I think is definitely superior to software. It basically goes through and you can take it down to a very granular level as far as the settings on the scanner, you can do high, medium, low sort of thing. The trouble is if you try to, it's like my my Epson flatbed has, you can do a raw scan, you can do a digital ice scan, or a Epson dirt and scratch removal feature. The trouble with some of it is when you try to do this through software, it starts mistaking things like I've seen on a ship, for example, a row of portholes, and it will decide that this porthole is dirt and it takes out a porthole. So then if I've done that, I have to go clone a porthole back over the missing porthole sort of thing. So I have found on Photoshop, I hardly ever can use the dirt and scratch removal feature on Photoshop, because if you have a line going across somebody's face, and you would think that the thing would be smart enough to automatically take it out, it doesn't. The healing brush in Photoshop does.
Yeah. Mhm.
So that's how I'll get the lines. Sometimes you got to clone somebody's lip or change things around or whatever. But the healing tool is one of the greatest things. The Nikon scanner is one of the greatest pieces of hardware. The healing brush is one of the greatest pieces of software I've ever seen. But the overall, the scratch and dirt removal in Photoshop, I think is crap, and I use it 2% of the time or something. So
Yeah, I tend to select areas and stick it on those areas. And you're right, I won't let it, if there's detail behind the scratch, it's the healing brush and several other things. But if it's just a sky shot or something like that, I'll select it up and then stick the dirt and scratch removal on that. That tends to work pretty well for me.
right. Jim's waving his hand.
Yes, it should be noted here that the dust and scratch removal features in software like Photoshop is an after the fact way of doing it, and it's definitely a way you should do it. But you definitely use the firmware in the scanner, because it's actually using hardware in the scanner. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it very well to everyone, but the scanner is actually using infrared light and other techniques optically to recognize the actual physical piece of dust there and to not record it in the first place. I don't know if it beams at a different angle so that it looks around the piece of dirt or just how it works, but there is hardware removal of the dust before it even gets written out as a file, and then take it into your software to do further cleaning up.
Yeah, like I said,
If you read the manual, if you read the manual for the scanner, it goes into a big explanation on that.
when I first saw the demonstration of the Cool Scan, I couldn't believe it. So I bought my Cool Scan 4, which took me from whatever the HP scanner was really low. It was maybe 300 dots per inch. All of a sudden, I was now at 2,900 dots per inch. So I scanned thousands of slides, having a great time. And then Nikon announces the Cool Scan 5, which now does it at 4,000 dots per inch. And it's like, oh, wow. So now I've rescanned all the 2,900 DPIs. And it also, I've learned an awful lot about color correction, the stuff since then. And then people, if they invented a new scanner that said we're going to do it at 8,000 DPI, I would shoot myself. There's no way I'm scanning 50,000 slides all over again.
Why is it these photos fade even when you keep them in a closed book in a dark closet? Is it a chemical reaction? It's certainly not exposure to light.
No, it's a chemical reaction. They're done with different dyes, and Kodachrome was a great process that used different layers and put it all together. A lot of the other cheaper ones just don't do it, and over time the chemicals just fade. So it's bad, obviously terrible if you've got it in heat, humidity, or whatever. Wayne, you had something to add on that?
Yeah, the Kodachrome is known for its long life if it's stored dark. It is more sensitive to light than the ectochromes and the other chromes. But all color films suffer chemical deterioration, light or dark.
Yeah, I'll get you 1 second, Dave. Yeah, I tended to shoot over the years. I started with Kodachrome like everybody else, and then I happened to switch to Ektachrome over the years because it does a really nice job on outdoor blues that I particularly liked. And since most of the things I was taking were outdoor photography and scenic shots. I just happen to like the hue of Ektachrome, which is held, to me was better. That, as I mentioned earlier, has tended to fade to blue, so they can get really, really blue. Kodachrome also changed their formula, over the years. So before the last years of Kodachrome, the last years of Kodachrome were crap compared to the early ones. You can get a Kodachrome shot from the 50s that looks like it was taken yesterday, and get a Kodachrome shot from the 80s that looks like garbage, because they El Cheapo'd it. Wayne?
Yeah, if anybody has the older Viewmaster 3D discs, those were all made on Kodachrome, and the color is still great today. And sometime in, I don't know, the 60s, they switched out of Kodachrome, and those discs all faded pink.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned, and I will not forget you, Dave. I'm glad you mentioned the Viewmasters. If you go to worldsfairphotos.com, look for the Expo 58 tab. I've taken one of the sets of the Viewmasters. I've scanned it, digitized it, and you can see the left image, you can see the right image, and you can also see the 3D image. So again, go to worldsfairphotos.com, look for Expo 58, and down at the bottom is the thing of Viewmasters. That also brings me into about a couple weeks from now. We go to, again, the major page for this, worldsfairphotos.com, look under Zoom, got the upcoming dates. Dave Bossert, who wrote the book, co-wrote the book on Disneyland in 3D, is going to be giving a presentation in May on Disneyland in 3D. And he's made a very gracious effort if you do not have a set of 3D glasses, send Dave a self-addressed stamped envelope. His information is on the page, and he will send you back a free set of 3D glasses. Once you get your free set of 3D glasses from Dave, then I will be doing Expo 67 in 3D. I will be doing the 64 World's Fair in 3D, and we'll go back and look at Disneyland in 3D now that Dave, through his generosity, has made it popular. So again, on the main site where I list all the calendars and all the links are for the upcoming talks, Dave's coming second week of May, I think. I don't have it in front of me. But if you don't have his book, it's a great book. I put a link out there on how to get it. And I think he's going to be, and now Carol's turning green. Huh, there's something going wrong with the internet.
You're green. You're green now.
Yeah, you turned green too.
Carol's not green.
Green with envy.
No, but it's funny because I didn't see myself as green, but
how many people see me as green?
Now you're green again.
Oh, weird. I have to figure out what's going on.
So Bill, when you digitize all these photos, what type of media do you store it on? Because media doesn't even last forever. So what do you prefer?
Well, I am a fanatic in that regard. I store them on a hard disk. So I have my disk V for data. Every 4 hours, my computer copies all my data from my D drive to my E drive. So in case the D drive craps out, I've got it. I use Carbonite, which goes off to the cloud and instantaneously uploads everything offsite, so I've got it there. And then once a week, I do a total backup of each of the hard drives that go off. So the D drive, the E drive, everything gets copied off to external hard drives that then leave the premises and then get recycled on a grandfather, father, son situation. So I think when I counted up at one point in time, I have 8 copies of the data somewhere in existence at any one point in time. So if, God forbid, something happened, because this happened to a friend of mine. I told him about getting this program second copy everything from your data drive to a backup drive. Well, he omitted step 10 of whatever, which was unplug the backup drive. He got one of those ransomware viruses on his computer. It encrypted his data drive, and it absolutely happily encrypted his backup drive. So none of my backup drives are connected online, and everything is offline. If you don't use it, again, I get nothing for it. I don't get any money. The program Carbonite is a real saver. It runs on your computer pretty much in the background, so it's everything offline. And if a file gets deleted or changed, you have 30 days to bring it back from their server. So if you did get a virus and it went off and it took your, wedding pictures and corrupted them and holding them for ransom, it's going to corrupt it on your hard drive. Carbonite's going to happily upload a corrupted copy to their server, but it's for 30 days keeping your old ones. So you can go back and say, I got corrupted on May 1st. Give me everything back to where it was on April 15th, and you can get your entire contents back. And it's about 100. They have various programs. So I think it's the one I use where they'll send you everything back on a hard drive, because it could take forever for me to. I've got 8 terabytes or so stored with them. It would take forever to bring that back on a download. They'll mail me a hard drive, and it's about $150 a year. So I thoroughly recommend in today's digital age doing it. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks. You don't just burn them to a DVD.
Oh, no. Matter of fact, I do have copies burned to DVDs, but DVDs are not permanent. CDs are not permanent. Again, I try to keep multiple copies of everything, because there's no way I'm ever going to do all this stuff again. There's no way I probably could in my lifetime. They're not going to last that long.
You're saying if you had a library of DVD movies, they're eventually going to fade out on you too.
I think of all, and I own thousands of DVDs, and I think I've had maybe one go bad. So the failure rate's pretty good. But again, at what point do the DVDs last, but you can no longer get a DVD player? So
that's right.
That's part of the issue. People, as Dr. Carpenter knows from NASA, they have tapes that you can't even read anymore because they scrapped all the hardware that could read it, and now they run around looking for hobbyists. Do you happen to have one of these tape drives in your garage? So Dave's had his hand up patiently.
Yeah, so just like the last question, I was going to bring up that very thing, that once you go to all the trouble to restore the film, you need to make sure that you save that copy. And you went through a scenario that's working for you. I have a similar one. I use a Macintosh. There's a software that comes with it called Time Machine that does this incremental backup. But you need to have an offsite backup strategy. You use Carbonite. There's other programs that you can use for that, but Carbonite is excellent. And then you need a backup that works because it's not a question of if. Hard drives only last about 3 years, depending on whether they're spinning all the time or not. So it's going to fail. And when it does fail, you need an easy way to get that data back. So I have a RAID array connected to a Time Machine connection. And so if I lose a hard drive, I can rebuild that automatically. But Time Machine is an Apple product, and it doesn't work in the PC world. But there's things like that. And you do need to protect yourself as Carbonite does, where you can get a copy back should you get a virus, because people seem to have nothing better to do than cause problems writing, hacking your computer. And if it can happen, it will. So you don't want to lose all your valuable work. And then one step further, one thing else you were talking about is the DVD. I think we're stuck with the fact that technology is getting better. The newer technology, even in televisions, is 8K. So whatever you scan today, in 15 years, there'll be something better. It's not practical to go back and do it over, but technology is moving along. So DVD will last a long time, but 20 years from now, there will not be DVD players. They may be backward compatible or maybe not. So if you've saved your Digibeta professional level stuff and you want to get it back and you have your Digibeta tape and it still lasts, good luck finding a Digibeta tape player, because they don't use them anymore. So it's that's a problem. It just
Well, it's funny you should mention it, because I am very rapidly transferring all my old data tapes.
No.
To,
I love DVDs.
Yeah, one thing, again, having hard drives fail constantly, there's no doubt.
Probably still have DVDs and still have DVD players, but they're just not going to manufacture them.
Right.
Right. The one thing, having a RAID is great. And again, I have all these copies of it, but you got to get the stuff out of your house. So we have a time machine installation at home because I went PC, my daughter went Mac. So she has, every time she's here, it backs up. But you got to get it out of the house, because if your house burns down, or living out here in an earthquake zone, we're lucky. We're in an earthquake zone and right next to where all the fires come through LA. So it's really on the back of my mind. But, tornadoes, fires, floods, some crackhead that breaks into your house and just steals your stuff, you got to get this stuff out of the house. And for me, for $150 a year, the absolute peace of mind that my collection is someplace other than in Granada Hills is, to me, well worth it. So again, for any of you folks, and that's how I made my living, was doing disaster recovery plans for major corporations. I would have egg on my face for the rest of my life if I had not figured out how to come up with an economical plan for me. But for anybody on the call, if you ever have questions on the scanning or in backups or anything like that, please do drop me a line, because I think it's a presentation on slide restoration. Yeah, I could take 20 minutes and restore a slide and everybody can see how slow it is. No, I've actually thought about doing something about slide restoration. I'll just try to figure out how to do it so it's not entirely boring. But people might find it interesting to see what you have to do to bring one of these things back. So, okay, enough people would like to see that. I'd be glad to put that together.
I mean, there's lots of programs that are designed for photographers and, into the nitty gritty. But if you could pitch it for the average person, which is clearly you've got a lot of experience, but I think of you as, these programs are perfect because lots of people with a variety of different level of technology knowledge relate to them, because you've been able to present it in a way that we understand. Yeah. So I think if you could do something like that, that would be great. Well, particularly, here's what I started with. Here's how I'm going to go do it, and that'd be perfect.
I can do that, and I can save you some time. I'll say, now I'm going to scan, and we won't sit here for the 2 minutes and 37 seconds it takes it to do the scan. You can just show the before, after. Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. I'll do that. Speaking of upcoming talks, next week there is none because I'm going to be at the dentist. So you're welcome to watch the reruns, the best of the Zoom chats. The following week, I'm looking to do a talk on Disney and postmodern architecture. It was a talk that I gave with several other fellows a number of times. We've given it at the Disney Museum in San Francisco. We've done it for Postmodern Week several times in Palm Springs. And it dawned on me, I've not done it here. So folks might enjoy a look at the influence that Disney had on postmodern and the influence it had the other way. And then the week after that, Werner, who's sitting here, is going to take us to Hong Kong Disneyland. Werner, do you want to just tell folks a little bit about what to expect that week?
Sure. I don't know if you can hear me because I'm on an ancient computer right now.
We hear you fine.
Oh, okay, good. No, I went to Hong Kong Disneyland 2 years ago, and what was interesting to me is just how much of it is like Disneyland and how much of it isn't. Unlike Magic Kingdom, where it's an entirely different park built on the same concept of Disneyland, Hong Kong Disneyland actually reuses a lot of the old designs from 1955, and but it doesn't follow through with everything. So I think people will have fun seeing my pictures. I'm not an expert on Hong Kong Disneyland, but I think the show could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And I've mentioned before, Werner's site, yesforland.com. You can see all sorts of, what was there that ain't there no more at the Disney theme parks. And Werner, your Hong Kong Disneyland slides are already obsolete. Have you seen the new castle?
I have. I saw it under construction. So I will steal just a couple of pictures off the internet to throw in there, just so I can show a few things that have changed since then.
Great. And then so that takes us for a few weeks in the schedule. Ken Carpenter is looking to put together something on outer space that we talked about last week. So appreciate doing that. And again, if there's other particular parts of the world you visited that fit, and I'm very loosey-goosey, obviously, on themes, for theme parks, World's Fairs, or things that are just interesting. Sometimes I got to get back to my train pictures. I was working on some last night, and they just take forever because mentioned earlier, the one flaw the Nikon scanner has, it does not do a good job of dust and scratch removal on black and white prints or negatives. The silver, the black and white negatives, bounces the infrared beam right back on itself, and it turns it into just a tremendous blob of garbage. So if you've got a beautiful black and white shot, you've got to clean it up by hand. And so in some cases, I can wet mount them on my Epson scanner, and that's the technique you can do to take out some of the scratches in that. But other ones, it's just sitting there with the healing brush, taking out every little dust spot, takes forever. So a lot of the black and white stuff, like all my book on the 39 World's Fair that were in black and white, just took forever. I mean, I have tons of wonderful black and white images that I just, tomorrow. I'm not in the mood for taking out dots tonight. But again, if other people, when this pandemic's over, I can't wait to get back up to Sacramento, to the Railroad Museum, places like that. But if there are other folks, Randy, as I mentioned, if you'd ever like to take us through Expo 70, please let us know. Because again, I could do a half-ass job on it, but I think you know a lot more about it than I do. So I appreciate it. We've enjoyed Don's trip down Route 66, and wanting to get back on the road and that sort of thing.
So say, Bill, I got to ask you, with all that work you put into your photo collection, who's going to appreciate it someday when you're not around? Who would you pass it off to?
Right now, that's a good question. I started having negotiations with the Library of Congress about it, and they
Really?
Yeah, well, they said no, they couldn't do it because I don't have a signed release from every one of the original photographers, and because they administer the copyright laws of the United States, they can't, have things that they don't know 101% who that is. So I've started having some preliminary talks then with the Smithsonian, who's less interested in that than the Library of Congress. The pandemic's kind of put a dead end to that, but I've also started talking to the University of California in Fresno, who has a very large World's Fair collection that others have donated to. And they seem to be very reasonable people to work with. The trouble, again, the pandemic hit right as we were doing discussions. Because I'd like to get this stuff. I mean, everything I have is in my house, which is theoretically air conditioned, but it's nowhere near as climate controlled and protected as a university setting would be. So once this stuff is behind us, I want to start talking to the folks in Fresno again and seeing about finding a more long-term depository to it. The issue is I have a lot of World's Fair stuff, but then I also have a lot of like New York City, vintage LA. Where do you put some of that stuff? Disney has said they'd be more than glad to accept all my Disney stuff. No surprise there. So, I don't want to give it to Disney and see it go into the vault in the back lot and never seen again. So, the nice thing with dealing with folks like Fresno would make it publicly accessible, which is one of my desires. So, yeah, so I'm working on it, getting, trying to figure out what to do with it. I could also use some more shelf space if I got it all out of here. I mean, I've mentioned before, I scanned and digitized well over 25,000 slides of the 64 fair alone, and I probably have another 15,000 to go on that one fair. So I just this past week told Carol, I've started getting selective. I was buying everything that came up on the 64 World's Fair on eBay. I can't do it anymore. I have to realize, Carol had a birthday, I'm having a birthday, everybody has birthdays, and you can't go on forever. I've got to, start fixing it somewhere. I'm just looking at my closet here across the office. Man, I better find a way to turn back the clock. It's insane.
Bill?
I have fun with it.
Bill?
Yeah.
I think I may be wrong, but doesn't Kodak have something with taking libraries?
Kodak, not that I know of. The Kodak, maybe the Eastman Kodak House in Rochester might. Kodak is just a corporate shell, which really has zero connection to the Kodak that we all knew. And
Right. Well, I meant Eastman Kodak up in
Yeah.
Rochester.
That's a good thought, Scott. Let me write down Eastman House and talk to them.
Yeah, because there's something itching in the back of my head about that they do mass library protection or something.
Yeah, I'll check with that, because again, I'd hate to see all this stuff just end up on eBay or, chucked out in the garage. I was joking with my son the other day about, oh, if anything happens to me, this is all yours, and he's like horrified.
Does he even want it though? That's the question.
No, they don't, and rightfully so. I can understand why they don't want it. They've never been to these things. I mean, hopefully they want the pictures of my family and my grandparents and all that sort of stuff. But in terms of the overall fair stuff, no, they have no interest in it, and I don't expect them to. So, ideas to consider archive.org to make things publicly available. Yeah, right now I'm being a little selfish on that. If you notice, I don't just put everything I have available full online on full size and everything, because I do sort of sell these pictures on eBay or on my website in a full size format on CD, because again, the money I make on that is some of the money I use to offset the money I keep using to buy more of this crap. So if you give it all away for free, then nobody has any incentive. And I'll tell you, my tax man can tell you too, I don't make a lot of money on selling this stuff. But there are some people that say, like this past week, for example, somebody's doing a book on Claude Coates, famous Disney artist and Imagineer, and they needed some pictures from it. And I said, yeah, I can license you some pictures for it. And that puts a few dollars back into the pocket to go and buy some more pictures or to have the scanner refurbished every few years. So somewhere down the line, I'd like to think of where to physically put all this stuff. And I don't know if archive.org physically archives anything as opposed to just the digital. But again, if people have worked, a friend of mine's worked really well with the Smithsonian, and I'm hoping to get that talk going again. And I'd like to have it go someplace other than on a yard sale.
Bill?
Yeah, Joey?
Yeah, Joey here. I asked Flushing Meadow Park if they want all their scrap metal back, and they told me to keep it.
You bring up an interesting thing with Flushing Meadows, and that's a really interesting consideration. I might have thought about donating my World's Fair slides to the museum, the Queen's Museum, except a lot of people in the 70s and 80s donated their stuff to the Queen's Museum. And then a new curator came into the Queen's Museum and said, oh, we're going to de-emphasize the Queen's Museum. Let's de-accession this stuff, which means sell it off. And I don't want to do that. If somebody's going to sell it, I might as well sell it. So again, if I give it to someone like Fresno or anybody else, it's going to be, with a caveat that if you want to get rid of it, you give it back to my kids and they can get rid of it. My Boy Scout camp that Carlos and I both worked at, a number of years ago, the Boy Scout Council said, oh, we want to sell the property off, we're not using it. And I popped up my hand and said, oh, no, this deed was given, the guy that donated the money gave it to the Boy Scouts as a camp. You cannot do this. If you get rid of it, you got to give the money back to this guy's family. And the Boy Scouts said, oh, well, that's people break that clause in deeds all the time. We can break it. We got lawyers. And I said, you know how many lawyers I can find that would find a way that we don't do this? And luckily, we convinced them that it would be a tremendous bad PR move on the Boy Scouts to do this. And now the camp is open and still thriving. So, and again, if you donate anything to anybody, please make sure that if they want to get rid of it, you have a plan B and where you want to given to next.
Bill, I heard that story.
About IPR?
Yeah, when they wanted to sell the camp.
Yeah, they thought it was a great idea because they had sold off Alder Lake. They got a couple $100,000, and they all went off and bought new cars to the scout executives. And
when they sold off part of the camp in Wading River.
Yep.
And exactly what you're talking about. And someone told me your story.
Yeah. No,
And
I luckily knew enough about the history of it. I think it was Casper, he was the guy that gave him the money for it, and said, nope, 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 no, this was donated for a Boy Scout camp. It was not donated for, you down the road. So luckily, the guys that are at council now are totally different than the guys who were on the council in the 90s. It was a whole different situation. And again, sorry to bore the rest of you, but some of us share the Boy Scout thing. When I had heard the camp was closed, Bill Troop and I made the offer we would go back there and do a site survey of the property with the eye towards reopening it. Oh, no, it's been shut for 5 years and rotted away. You'll never do it. When we finally convinced them to let us do it, and Bill and I flew back there, walked every inch of the camp, did a survey of every building. The chlorinated beds need replacing, but the transformers seemed acceptable. The road did this and everything. And, that's when they said, well, we're going to sell it. I said, oh, no, you're not. And they got into things like we were going to tear down the dining hall because it hasn't been used in years. It looks like crap. So we raised the money to paint it. Well, the dining hall needs a new roof. We put a new roof on it. So luckily now that the camp is still going, and I am so hoping travel will become safe. So we're all back there for the 65th anniversary this fall.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
Bill, this is Dave. I'm on your site and I'm looking for the link to the Dave Bossard comment you made.
Yeah, look, go to the Zoom link. It should be on the right-hand side, Zoom Talks. See the Zoom Talks down near the bottom?
Oh, near the bottom. Okay. Trying to do this and watch you too. So theme parks, miscellaneous, past, Zoom Talks. Yep.
Then if you look down there, you'll see the upcoming schedule of stuff to come.
So click on Zoom.
Yeah.
Yep. See that?
And if you scroll down, you'll see what I have on my screen. We've got the thing with the link for today. No talk next week. Disney and postmodern architecture. Keep going down. There's Dave Bossard and the address in Valencia to right to your glasses. And I made a typo. That 2020 book is 2000. Yeah, 2020 book. I got to take a 2 off of there. You see it?
Okay, it's the Old Mill Press.
Yes, that's
in
it.
Valencia.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And any dollar bills sent his way. Okay.
He did not ask for any money. That's purely my suggestion whatsoever. That he's doing this out of the goodness of his heart. If again, the glasses on Amazon are pretty cheap. If anybody wants to buy in there, you can also buy some nice plastic framed ones and everything to make it easier. But Dave's being a real gentleman by offering to both do his time and also to send out the glasses. So if anybody would like to send him a dollar bill, I'm sure he would not say no.
Well, Dave's a great guy. I worked with him when I worked at Feature Animation. So yeah, I'm going to do that. If nothing else, to send him a note.
Yeah, boy, I was just scrolling through these. Can you believe the first of these was 4/25/20? Time goes fast when you're having fun, huh?
Yes, so are we.
Yeah. Well, appreciate everybody joining, and sorry again, I would much rather be with you, but 8 o'clock next Saturday, I'm having the next thing of my implant done. And I actually looked at the calendar and said, 8 o'clock, I ought to be out of there by 9 o'clock, but I'd be home by 10 o'clock. But then I realized I still have a Novocaine. I'm talking about there.
How do you find a dentist that works on a Saturday?
It's excellent. He's an oral surgeon, and he goes. He doesn't have his own office. He specializes in this sort of stuff. It's really a mess up behind my sinuses and stuff. And he goes and does this on Saturdays and goes, from dentist to dentist to dentist to do it. He's absolutely an amazing guy. So my dentist has a Saturday hours once a month for people that need to come in. Some people just need cleanings and that. And he opens on one Saturday a month to do this. And he takes Fridays off instead of Saturdays. So he just, makes his weekends a little different than the rest of us. So.
And you have to get up before dawn just to go to the dentist.
Yeah. I'm not a morning person, but maybe I'll sleep through the procedure. So it's this is supposed to be really minor. This is put a post in, and hopefully it's all done. But you know, I see these ads on TV about, no, get a you know, implant done in 4 hours for $600. And I said, man, I spent a lot more time, a lot more money. But I guess if, yeah, but this one comes with a warranty. So, so great. I appreciate everybody joining. Hope everybody has a great week. And again, Expo 58, I don't know a lot about it. Do appreciate, by the way, things like Randy adding stuff on it. On any of these talks, if there's information you have that I have glossed over or made a god-awful mistake or anything, I take zero umbrage on being corrected. Other than I do love on Facebook where you post something and some expert jumps out that knows everything. And when you say, no, that was like, I'll post a picture, I mentioned this before, my car parked on Main Street at Disneyland. That's a Photoshop mock-up. No, it's my car. No, it's not. You're full of shit. You know, yeah. That's the only thing that drives me crazy. But you know, extra little factoids and things like that, I'm so glad. And oh, Greg's got a factoid, I'm sure, at the end of our day. So go ahead, Greg. You have to unmute yourself there. There you go.
Okay. This album is called America the Beautiful. It is from 1959. And it's called, and I'm sure that Tom Brooks has it. It's a music mural album, and it has a book inside. These are probably scenes from the Circarama film. I haven't seen the Circarama film in a few days, so I couldn't verify that. But according to the notes inside the album, it was released in 1959, and it was created to tie in with the Russian dubbed release of the Circarama film, and then the subsequent release of the Circarama film at Disneyland. So this album was released so that they could sell it at Disneyland, and it also, you know, ties in with the Brussels premiere. What's interesting about Brussels, based on, because this is really fascinating, because nobody talks about Brussels World's Fair, and yet, because the New York World's Fair was so spectacular and had such a long, eternal effect on all of us because of what it did for Walt Disney and theme parks. But Brussels really was the first time that Walt Disney had anything at a World's Fair. Even though it was just this one thing, it really was the first time that something was there and people piled in to see it. And it kind of is significant, if only in that way. It's a pretty major thing.
Well, obviously, Greg gets 2 demerits right there because you're wrong. You must have missed my talk about the 1939 World's Fair in San Francisco, where Walt had his cartoon at the Nabisco thing. Did his first?
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Okay.
But you see, that's why I have to have detention.
Yeah.
You see, but that's, you know,
Greg knows so much more about this.
See, and that's what.
On the record,
yeah, but Tom Brooks probably album.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, if in the future you would ever like to do a talk about Disney tie-ins of the LPs to the theme park, please put that together. And, you know, I'm sure folks would absolutely love to see.
After that, Bill, I don't know that I'll ever say anything again.
Well, that was my intent, but no.
You can't argue with the experts.
But, you know, I don't even think it's Carol's birthday either. Now you're going to tell me that's not true.
Well, now I have to tell you that's true. She's not even my wife. She's an actress. Nobody puts up with me on an ongoing basis. No, actually, Walt also had the 1933 World's Fair. Oh, look at, giant flowers.
Terry and Louie.
Oh, okay. She just called me. I have to call her
Yeah, no,
back.
you don't have to. I don't think.
Okay.
I mean, she couldn't reach you, so she called our home phone.
Oh, okay. Carol's just getting a delivery of birthday flowers. Walt actually had a presence at the 33 Chicago Fair. Again, mentioned that they had a gift shop there, and you could go and get a Timex watch custom made at the fair with a Mickey Mouse face on it. There was a specialized box that they came in, and it was the first Disney store type thing that we've seen, a Disney themed gift shop. And then there were some other people who took some horrible Mickey Minnie cutouts and stuck them in a kid's playground sort of thing. But Greg, in all seriousness, I mean, I bow to Greg on anything with Disney records left and right. if you can put together something someday and, you know, play some extracts of some of the records and stuff, you know, you and I did that thing on Stu's show years ago together. I'd love you to do something on the Saturday for us about the Disney records.
Okay, I'll do something someday.
Okay, appreciate it. Well, appreciate everybody joining, and those that stuck with us. Again, Expo 58 was great fun. A couple weeks from now, I've got most things planned for a couple weeks going out. I'm going to be putting together Hemisphere 68, the San Antonio World's Fair. I've been working, hey, Don, yep, working diligently on my pictures, trying to take them from the pre-restored to restored state for that. So appreciate folks joining us. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Next week, everybody can go clean out their garages, or you can sit here and watch yourself on reruns. So appreciate it. And everybody have a happy Easter for those that celebrated.
Thank you very much, Phil. Great presentation.
Great.
Happy birthday, Carol. Happy birthday, David.
Yes, happy birthday,
Phil.
David.
Happy birthday, Carol.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.